This is chapter 15 in our series in relation to the race riots in Wales. This relates to Cardiff and is about the perpetrators, those arrested by the police and charged by the court with riotous assembly, leading the riots, which is important. Now, the reason it's important is because mobs don't just happen. You may have an instant flare-up, but it doesn't continue for days, and it doesn't continue on a whole range of different sites. For that, you need agitators. You need leaders, people who inspire a mob. That's why the offence of riotous assembly is important. These people who we're going to name here are, except for one, all career criminals. Most of them have offences related to stealing and violence. And that's the reason we're identifying these 10 perpetrators. They were central and are identified by the police consistently as being wherever the violence and robbery was. Now, in the court case, which was held in Swansea, County Cork, a number of men were found guilty in court of being ringleaders, rioters. There were 10 of them. Timothy Clancy, Sidney Blashill, James Bond, Patrick Linahan, William Parker, Charles Snell, Ernest Perkins, William Jones, Albert Sparks, and James Rees. Now, Albert Sparks was 20 years old. He was a sailor. He was sentenced to 3 months imprisonment. Now, in relation to Sparks, it's important to say when he was first arrested, the first offence he was charged with was wearing a sailor's uniform without authority, which may mean at that time he wasn't in the Navy or he wasn't supposed to be in uniform. So it's important to realise the jobs credited to the men in court are what we've listed, not whether they were actually in the army, because the likelihood is they were demobbed. And if you were demobbed from World War I, you were allowed to wear the uniform for 6 months after leaving. And in fact, many of them didn't actually have any other clothes but the uniform, including greatcoats. So they may not have actually been serving soldiers at the time of the riots. James Bond, a dock labourer, a career criminal, was given 20 months hard labour. William Jones was a coal trimmer. He was given an additional 4 months imprisonment to be served after a current term. Already in prison, he had an 11-year criminal record. Patrick Linahan was aged 38. Born in County Cork, Ireland, he was a dock labourer. He had a 21-year-old criminal record, and he was sentenced to 9 months hard labour. Charles Snell was a soldier. He was aged 21. He had a 7-year criminal record and was sentenced to 9 months hard labour. Sidney Blashill, who was aged 36, was a marine engineer. He had an 11-year criminal record and was sentenced to 18 months hard labour. Timothy Clancy, aged 30, was a labourer. He had a 12-year criminal record and he was sentenced to 18 months hard labour. William Parker is listed as being a soldier as well, aged 24. He had a 9-year criminal record and was sentenced to 18 months hard labour. Ernest Perkins, aged 28, was a labourer. He had an 11-year criminal record. He was sentenced to 18 months hard labour. His criminal record included 3 offences from 1917 to 1918 of illegally wearing military uniform and wound stripes, which identified invalided soldiers. He was charged with false pretences, which may have related to begging as a wounded veteran. James Rees, aged 27, born in Swansea, was a soldier. He is listed as being in the New Zealand Army. He had an 18-year criminal record and was sentenced to 18 months hard labour. The court record shows, although people may have thought he was from New Zealand, and that's the impression the paper shown, he was also known as Moses Rees, which is interesting, because in 1909 Moses Rees of Swansea was court-martialed for desertion and theft from the Welsh regiment. It's also interesting that none of the white men that were sentenced to prison were merchant seamen, and therefore the argument that black people were keeping them out of their jobs was spurious at best. It may also have been extremely convenient for men that wanted to steal from properties under the cover of mob violence. Now, at a later stage, we will look at the causes that people have related to the riots. Economic conditions, lack of employment, etc., etc., resentment. But one thing is for sure, those 10 perpetrators, ringleaders, all identified by the police, were not out of work because of black people taking their jobs. The jobs black people could take in Cardiff at the time were limited. In the main, they were merchant seamen or people who provided services to merchant seamen, such as boarding houses, etc. What is clear, these men were career criminals and, as such, benefited considerably from the riot. In fact, one of them, Sidney Blashill, when arrested, had 3 different outfits of clothes on, all stolen from a shop. Thank you for listening. Chapter 16, which is part 2 of Cardiff, will relate to the black people who were arrested and what happened to them.